Hello everyone, my name's Miranda and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my July wrap up where I talk about all the books that I read in July. I read 7 books and yeah, it's quite a lot actually. My reading really sped up in the last week of the month because I was ill, so I had lots of time to read. So the first book that I read was The Colony by Audrey Magee. So I listened to this on audio. Since I read it, it has been longlisted for the Booker Prize. I'm really happy it's been longlisted because I really enjoyed it. And it was my first 5-star of the year. So The Colony is set on an island off the coast of Ireland, and it is about the people who live on this island, but it predominantly follows 2 men, an Englishman and a Frenchman, who journey to this island and stay there for the summer. So the Englishman is there for, he's there to paint the island, paint the cliffs, and the Frenchman is there because he is writing and doing a study on the Irish language and the kind of descent of the Irish language and how it's been destroyed by English and British colonialism. The English guy does not care so much about that, and a lot of this book is them kind of clashing on that point. But also it's about the islanders and kind of how they are sort of caught in the middle of these 2 people, and they are expected to kind of choose a side, but also they are expected to kind of represent what the men want them to represent. So there's not a lot that happens. It's mostly about all these characters kind of living together and getting to know each other and having conversations. But I just felt like I got to know the characters so well, and the writing was so beautiful that I was just kind of totally sucked into it and had the best time. I should also say that all of this like not much plot is taking place kind of alongside the beginning of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and you kind of get a sense that that is happening, but it's only slightly encroaching on the island, and it only starts to kind of become more prominent in its kind of impact on the people on the island later in the book. This book for me is very much about like the atmosphere and the thought processes in the characters' heads, and the way that the writer kind of like shows those thought processes changing and being it goes like really fluidly from normal kind of narration into a stream of consciousness, back out again, like into speech. So there's a lot like going on it just feels very fluid. If you want something with like, you know, plot and where things are going to happen, this is not really gonna be for you. So yeah, I really loved it, and I would really recommend it if if it sounds like your kind of thing. Then I read Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Kupersmith. So I read this on my Kindle. It was longlisted for the Women's Prize this year, and I had been meaning to get around to it since I heard about it when it was longlisted, because it sounded amazing. There isn't one storyline necessarily that you can kind of say what it's about, but it starts off with a young woman who has moved to Vietnam from the US, and she's kind of gone there to sort of figure out herself, figure out who she is, and she's very unsure of like everything. But then she disappears. So that's kind of one strand of the story that you get, but this is told, it kind of centers around the disappearance, but for the first part of the book, all of the, like, you're following so many different threads that aren't obviously related to this woman or her disappearance, but then these different threads start to kind of come together and start to make some sort of sense, and then at the end it all kind of comes together in a very satisfying way. And I found this book so compelling. I was just, I was having the best time reading it. it's so creepy and so like just disturbing. Like there's lots of ghosts, there's lots of like things that might be ghosts and things like confusion, and oh, it's so good. But yeah, some of the scenes in this will haunt me, and I just really loved how it all came together into this, like at the end, this story about this woman who is really like, you know, lonely and unsure of herself and not sure like what she is doing or meant to be doing. It was really, really moving near the end, as well as being like very, very creepy and atmospheric and like funny at times, but just, yeah, it's brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it. Then I read Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen. So I read this for the Weird Women book club run by Moles and Emma. They have an Instagram that I will link in the description. Yeah, I enjoyed this. I listened to it on audio. So this is about a kind of TV show, a reality TV show called The Catch, where a group of young women kind of compete for the attentions of one rich young guy. It's basically The Bachelor, I think, in my kind of understanding. You join this TV show as they're going to a place called Otter's Island, which is very remote, and they're going there for the finale. No one really understands why, but it is known as a kind of like LGBT haven. So yeah, it's unsure of why this kind of like very heteronormative, like, you know, glossy reality TV show is going to this kind of remote rural island. And then once they get there, weird things start happening, and there are kind of sightings of something. There are stories about women who previously disappeared. So I enjoyed this one. I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook is good. It's got lots of different narrators, which I enjoyed. And I feel like you do get a sense of like all of the different characters. But I think this book could have very easily been either a short story or a much longer novel with more kind of focus on the stuff that happens at the end, which I'm not going to spoil, but essentially the ending is very quickly wrapped up, and a lot of the time is spent in the kind of beginning and middle sections on the women and the contestants, and them kind of bitching about each other and you know, like fighting and their kind of drama, and that's fun, and it's fun to read about, but not for as long as it goes on, and it's not really done in any kind of way that like says anything particularly special. There is one character who is a sort of, she's very much a like not like other girls kind of character, and she's sort of above all the other contestants, or considers herself to be, and she really got on my nerves, and partly because all she was really like, you know, all her kind of intelligence and stuff was, you know, like, and her different thoughts was just, oh, reality TV is like so fake, and that was kind of as deep as like the social kind of commentary went, which was kind of disappointing. That being said, it is really funny. It's very funny and very entertaining. I just wish that it had either, you know, been shorter, and not had so much of the kind of like bitchiness, just like serving to pad it out, or it had been longer in the end section and more of the kind of the island and the sort of queer haven of the island had been explored, because that's kind of set up and then never really goes anywhere. I think it had a lot of potential, but it fell a bit short for me, which was a shame. But I did still like enjoy the experience of reading it. July really was a month of audiobooks. 5 of the 7 books that I read were audiobooks, and the next one was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. So this is a pretty well-known book. It's kind of sci-fi dystopian, not really sci-fi to be honest. It feels very, very close to reality now, because it's about kind of post-apocalyptic world where there has been a very, very infectious virus that has suddenly come out of nowhere and spread very quickly, and killed like 99.9% of the population of the world, and society has collapsed very, very quickly. And then you follow partly a variety of characters during this kind of collapse period, like leading up to it and afterwards, like immediately afterwards, but then also a group of travelling actors and musicians who travel over the US and perform Shakespeare and music for people kind of 20 years after society has collapsed. And I really, really loved this. I thought this was so good. It's so readable, but so beautifully written. This was written in 2014, and there are quite a lot of moments where characters were kind of feeling something that I could really, really relate to, you know, reading it in the current time, like, you know, what's happened over the last couple of years. And I think I said it in my like mid-year check-in video when I was talking about this, but I did have COVID when I was reading this, and there was a character in it called Miranda, and it was all a bit close to home, but also like it just felt so real, and like I loved all of the kind of the ways that she explores how society collapsed, but then also how people start to kind of build things back up, and what people miss. I just thought it was lovely and really beautifully done, and I just enjoyed it all. Again, there's not much plot, but I think just the kind of atmosphere and the setting and the characters are really, really vivid, and yeah, it's just a really enjoyable one. Very, very, it's quite sad, obviously. You know, 99.9% of the people die, but yeah, it's just there are some haunting moments in this that will really stick with me, and I really, really enjoyed it. Then I listened to Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, another book, a long listed book. I've read 4 of the long list now of 13, and I've read those 4 because they were the most easily available to me, and hopefully I will read more soon. Yeah, Small Things Like These has been very popular and well received. I think it won the Orwell Prize, which is a prize for like political fiction, recently, and I didn't really like it very much. So it's very, very short. It's about 160 pages. The audiobook is only about 2 hours long, if that. So I listened to it quite quickly, like pretty much all in one go. And I just didn't like it. It's set in Ireland in the 1980s, and you kind of have, well, you follow a man who is a coal seller, and his sort of family. Basically you follow him like in the lead up to Christmas. He's kind of going about his, you know, rounds, delivering coal, doing his job, but he makes a delivery to the convent in the village, and he kind of, there's something a bit weird going on there. He's not entirely sure what's happening, and yeah, it kind of goes on from there. If you know anything about the like Magdalen laundries in Ireland, then that's what this is about, really. But also it's not, because that kind of whole setup with the convent and the girls in it is not really explored at all, in any kind of meaningful way. It's more about this male character going about his life and his kind of like inner conflict, which is fine, like that's totally fine. Like it's very much like a kind of moral tale of like looking at what happens when people like look the other way, and like why people might, you know, ignore things. That's all very interesting, but it's not explored in much depth. None of it is explored in much depth because it's so short. What is done really well is the atmosphere. So you really, really feel like, you know, you're in this kind of small village. It's Christmas, it's snowy, everyone is kind of struggling to like get by. It's very, very vivid in that sense, and I really did enjoy like how she constructed the setting and the atmosphere. I feel like if it just had a little bit more like meat on its bones in everything, it would have been a much better book. So yeah, that kind of annoyed me. I was like, this is fine, not really my thing. Then a book that is kind of polar opposite of small things like these, Animalia by Jean-Baptiste, translated by Wynne from French. This, I was basically, because I didn't finish any physical books in July, because I was reading this all month, and I read it quite slowly, but I really enjoyed it. So this is about, well, it starts with a family who own a farm in like northern France, I think, northern, like very rural, in the beginning of the 20th century. You follow this family and their farm. Not much happens, to be honest. It's kind of just like their everyday stuff. It then follows, in the second half, the family's like descendants, so grandchildren and great-grandchildren, who are carrying on at this farm where it has kind of expanded into a kind of pig factory. Everything is going wrong and is out of control and just collapses. I don't know, I loved this despite the fact it is disgusting and depraved. It's gross. It's so gross. Again, I said this in my mid-year check-in video when I talked about this a bit, but if you don't like the idea of reading about mistreatment of animals, don't read this. I don't think I'm ever going to eat pork again, and I'm okay with that decision, to be honest. I really can't tell you why I love this so much, apart from the fact that the writing is unlike anything I've ever read before. Like, this book is gross, but the writing, like the way that things are described, is just so incredible. Like in the first half, you get these amazing descriptions of like really, really detailed portraits of like the characters and their thoughts, but also like the nature and their surroundings, and it's just stunning. But then also, you know, in kind of conjunction with that, as well as getting the really beautiful descriptions of all the beautiful nature and stuff, you also get really gross descriptions of like, well, the war when it gets to World War One, like the treatment of the animals. But it's so like, it's so vivid and so, I don't know, like you can't look away from it. I don't know, I feel really weird recommending this because it's like, again, like I say, it's grim, but it's so good. It's so good. If you have a strong stomach and you don't mind reading about, I'm not even going to say what it's about, but like, you know, just it's brilliant. Also, I should just say maybe that like the kind of themes in here of like violence and how violence is kind of like transported from one generation to the next, and people trying to be sort of like, you know, dominant over nature and over other people, but all of that is just done so elegantly. It's such a beautiful book about disgusting things, and I loved it. Then, last but not least, I read my my third, I've since finished my fourth, my third book along listed book, which was Treacle by Garner. So I listened to this on audio again. This is so weird, it's so fun. Basically it's about this boy called Joe, I believe, who encounters a man he's a rag and bone man. He's like, you know, going along the streets, and they kind of become friends, and then weird magical stuff starts to happen. Interdimensional travel. Joe can see out of one eye, like, you know, the normal world. Out of the other eye, he can see a like totally different kind of magical stuff. You just have to go along for the ride and kind of accept this sort of like magical weirdness that is happening, that isn't ever explained. I think a lot of this went over my head. There are lots of like mythological references, but I didn't entirely get them all, partly because I was listening to it on audio, I think, but also because I was listening to it on audio while half asleep on the sofa, feeling very ill. So I don't know if that was a good way to read it or not, because it kind of, the whole thing just felt like a dream. And I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. I don't know what the hell was going on, what any of it meant, but I really enjoyed it. Again, it's very short. The audiobook is great. If you feel like it, go for it. So yeah, that's what I read in July. It was very much an audiobook / non-physical book heavy month, but I, read a lot. It was a good time, and I think it was actually, like everything I really, really enjoyed. So it was, not everything, but like the vast majority of the books that I read were really enjoyable and really fun, and I really liked them. So I'm pretty happy. I feel like I'm getting a bit more in my groove with reading, so that's really nice. And yeah, I thank you for watching. Hopefully I will see you very, very soon.